So what is the problem? Why there is so low attendance in presentations? Are people really busy with something else, or they don't want to attend? I don't think this is the number that we expect. The 3 groups from each section would make it at least 5% in each group, right? That will make 45, and I don't see for even like 20 people here. What's going on? And I have a way to track this one, so therefore people who do not show up might face a grade drop, because of this lack of attendance. Right? There is nothing much that I can do, because you see, these are certain things that you got to learn. Being on time is a habit. You have to inculcate that habit. There is no excuse that oh, I was caught in a traffic jam, right? From even if you are in the remotest hostel of the campus to these things, you have to time your journey accordingly. There's something that if you go, I think all of you should live in Japan for at least few months to understand how this habit can be inculcated. Because it so happens that because we it's okay to be late. This has become part of your daily routine, and this is not going to help you in the long run. If you really want to be if you really want to improve, these are certain things, a very disciplined life that will help you really progress further. So I just don't understand, how to change this one, because I've seen it, day in and day out. You guys ready? If it takes so long to even just set up these things, that will delay the process.
There's been some talk about why I remain silent.
Facing several questions over the casting of a Pakistani actor Fawad Khan in his movie, filmmaker Karan Johar has released a video on the same. Let's listen in.
There's been some talk about why I remain silent for the past 2 weeks. Today I'd like to clarify that the reason why I remain silent is because of the deep sense of hurt and the deep sense of pain that I felt that a few people would actually believe that I'm being anti-national. I need to say this, and I say this with strength, that for me, my country comes first. Nothing else matters to me but my country. I've always felt that the best way to express your patriotism is to spread love, and that's all I've ever tried to do through my work and my cinema. When I shot my film Ae Dil Hai Mushkil in September to December last year, the climate was completely different. The circumstances were completely different. There were efforts made by our government.
So, good evening everybody. Remember this video? An incident from not so recent past when our very own Fawad Khan was seen more as a Pakistani than an artist. So, newsroom was full of heated debates, and not just another India-Pakistan rivalry, but it was about banning Pakistani artists in India. So if you believe you're a nationalist, so brimming with nationalist pride that you're ready to raise sword against anyone, basically from other nationality, who does not conform to your ideas or belief, is not nationalism. Yes, it's not nationalism, it's mere chivalry which is disguised under the false nationalism. So this brings me to a very interesting phase of nationalism. Nationalism basically has 2 extremes, patriotism and jingoism. patriotism we are very well aware of. It's attachment to one's homeland, and this attachment comes from sense of belongingness. Sense of belongingness pertaining to common culture, shared history, language, etc. But what exactly is jingoism? So if I say I love my India, it's patriotism. But when I say I love India and I hate Pakistan, it's jingoism. If patriotism is a virtue, jingoism is a vice. Going by the definition, jingoism is that extreme form of nationalism which leads to aggressive foreign policies. So if I'm a jingoistic, I'd advocate the use of violence and threat against other nationalities. Now, one very interesting fact about jingoism, it not only affects people from other nationalities outside our national boundaries, it also impacts people within our national boundaries. And this makes me talk about Salil Chaturvedi. So he's a guy, he's not just another guy, he's a very famous author and poet. He's also an activist for disabled. He was thrashed in a cinema hall in Goa just because he couldn't rise for national anthem. So basically, he had to prove his Indianness, being an Indian, and also you have to prove your Indianness by rising to national anthem. Why? Why do we need to trumpet our love for India? So this is the very sad part of nationalism, rather jingoism. And to know more about it, I'd like to call upon Soham to guide us further.
Hello. Thank you, Anamika. Good morning, everyone. Am I audible? Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Now, if we look at the definition of jingoism and xenophobia, jingoism mainly deals with a very aggravated form of nationalism with respect to foreign policy. And xenophobia deals with a strong feeling of hatred and repulsiveness towards foreign elements. Now, again, what is patriotism? Patriotism mainly deals with a strong love for the motherland, as Anamika has pointed out. Now, if we dig deeper, then we can relate both the terms with superiority. That is, my country, my region, my culture, and my systems is superior to you. So if one fine day a foreigner comes by and presents his or her ideologies in front of me, I will feel a deep sense of insecurity. I will feel that he or she is trying to harm me, that he or she is trying to take away something precious from me, and as a result, I will just lose out on the status quo. And obviously, I won't accept that. So going back in time, we can see that the roots of both the terms have been found in England, of course, where they were advocating strong hatred against the Russians in the 1870s. And as time went by, we can see that to be branded as a true Englishman, one needed to speak English, and the people who were speaking in Welsh or in Gaelic languages, they were strongly disregarded and ostracized all across the society. So why does this disregard come? It comes from acceptance. Again, patriotism says that we should not only uphold our own values and feelings, we should also acknowledge and respect other cultures, which a strong jingoist would not agree to. Now, going back to the source of jingoism and xenophobia, we can relate two factors. The number one is our upbringing. Ever since our childhood, we have been taught to live within a very finite number of customs, rules, systems. As a result, these divisions with respect to politics, religion, etc. have been ingrained within us. And as we grow older, somehow we lose that independence or freedom to accept other cultures as well. The second factor would be blind faith. Now, there is no religion, no country, no system that is perfect. Nobody has been able to find the one-stop solution to all the problems of humankind. But still, people practice blind faith. They defy logic. As a result, they do not know how to acknowledge the shortcomings in their own system and to rectify them with respect to something which is better in some other system. Now, I'd like to show you three theories of xenophobia. The first one is scapegoating. In scapegoating system, there is a lot of frustration and deprivation in the society, which leads to a lot of social unrest. Now, the people are unable to find a solution to their own problems. So when a foreigner comes and he or she does her own thing, which is not necessarily a wrongdoing, everyone blames him or her, which is a form of bullying itself. The second theory is isolating theory. We can relate this with the isolation of the apartheid South Africa with the international community. Also, there has been a lot of divisions among the South Africans, also with respect to South Africa and, of course, the rest of the world. And the third one is biocultural difference, which shows the visible physical biological factors and the cultural differences. We can see these with respect to the treatment which black people have to undergo in white countries. Now, to carry the presentation forward, I'd like to invite Harin and Meghasree. Thank you.
Okay. Am I audible? So as my colleagues have already said the basics about Jingoism and xenophobia, now I'll be taking you to the examples of how Jingoism is going to lead to, eventually lead to xenophobia. So when you talk about or think about xenophobia, the first name which comes to your mind is Donald Trump. Of course, he's the recent phenomena. But it won't be right if we are not dealing with Hitler, who actually mainstreamed this. So basically what happened was, like, after the First World War, the sanctions which were imposed upon the Germans were way too stringent, and that led to the discontentment among the Germans. And what Hitler did was, he exploited that discontentment to the maximum, and eventually what he made was, he made it an issue that he basically proposed this idea that it should be the right of Germans to rule the world. And this is how he subjugated the Jews and went on a war against every other nation.
So in a similar fashion, Trump's campaign has been happening. So even before the presidential elections, he was blaming the Mexicans, Hispanics, and the Chinese for the job loss or the crime rates which is happening in USA. And he has not even mellowed down even after winning the presidential election. So apart from that, all the trade wars which are happening right now is related to the xenophobia and the jingoism which he is suffering from.
So switching over to free world, I would like to talk about what happened in Europe. So whenever someone mentions Europe, what comes to your mind is Human Development Index, standard of living, and the liberal views of Europeans. Even in Europe, the right-wing phenomenon has been very trending. Look at Poland and Hungary. So what these two nations has been doing is they are making laws. The laws which are not even allowing the refugees to go and fight for their own rights, their own legal rights. So in any nation, legal rights are given to all, irrespective of the citizenship or not. So these two nations, what they did was, like, they were not actually following the UN Refugee Convention, according to which a refugee is not supposed to be sent back to the country where their persecution is happening. Apart from that, if we look into the nations like Germany and France, so in these nations, what has been happening is the right-wing parties, which had a very negligible presence after the Second World War, they are even increasing in numbers. For example, take Lee Pence, the extremist. He got 5% of the presidential election votes sharing. Besides that, the Alternative to Germany party, who got 94 seats in the assembly elections out of more than 500 seats. If we look at the past electoral votes, then you will be astonished to know that they never got more than 10 votes ever. So switching over to...
So the situation is not just confined to France or Poland or Hungary. Even the Germany has the same issue. Previously, the Alternative for Democracy, which is an extreme right-wing party in Germany, has less than 10 seats in a more than 500 seats of the assembly. Right now, they are enjoying a strength of 94. And this phenomenon of right-wing extremism and xenophobia is not just confined to Europe or America. We have such examples in Africa. Look at South Africa, what is happening. So whenever there is South Africa is the only developed country in entire Africa. So the migrants from Mozambique, Kenya and everybody, they usually come to South Africa for finding a better livelihood opportunities. But whenever there is something issue related to employment or even the sharing of the resources, they say the scarce resources are being being cornered by the migrants. So there is too much of conflict which is going on in South Africa right now. And in the Middle East, we have Israel. So we have a Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. He wants to wipe out the entire Arab world. So his policy has been entirely related to the controlling of the terrorism, which he thinks is result of the Islamic extremism, entirely because of the Islamic extremism. And if you look at the Asian situation, the Japan and Chinese, so the Japanese, prior to the Second World War, like they were an expansionist state. They were trying to expand into China and other Southeast Asian nations. And there were incidents of rape, mass rapes, and even the women were forcibly brought into prostitution in order to satisfy the sensual pleasure of the soldiers. There is a social experiment. Not a social experiment. There was a voluntary integration program which happened in America in the 2000s, early 2000s, where the Hispanics, Asians, and everybody, government tried to integrate them into it. So the initial resistance from the teachers and everybody will be shown in this video. And the video is from the movie Freedom Writers.
Also, for Muslim to get here, it takes 3 buses, almost 90 minutes each way. My God. So I wouldn't give them too much of a homework load. They'd be wasting a lot of time following up on overdue work. All right. Too bad you weren't here even 2 years ago. We used to have one of the highest scholastic records in the district, but since voluntary integration was suggested, we've lost over 75% of our strongest students.
And most of your kids will be gone anyway. Well, eventually they just stop coming.
They won't be able to read that. Look at their rating scores. And if I give your kids these books, I'll never see them again. If I do, they'll be damaged. Why would you be wasting your money?
I'm the one.
So to conclude this,
my door at night.
So why do we really fear others or hate others? Throughout the animal kingdom, it is pretty evident that there is need to distinguish between the foreign objects and the self, rather than in groups and out groups. But xenophobia is more of a thing that is us versus them. So we need to ask these questions. Is it really necessary through all these evolutionary years that we need to have these ideas with us? Is it really necessary to have nationalism turn into jingoism to have with us? If we see through the history of our country, it has been a country considered that hasn't attacked any of the other countries. It was open and welcoming to all other foreigners, and we were prospering throughout the history. The ancient India was more prosperous than the recent one. So some unfortunate events happened, foreign invasions happened, and that really changed our mindset. What happened? After that, we really fear others. We fear the foreign objects. We hate foreigners. We hate Britishers. We hate Pakistanis. Even a Muslim person in our country traveling in a train is beaten to death just because of his looks. Gay person, the homosexuals are discriminated against. In our country, Biharis are beaten out of Mumbai. And it is not just example of our country. It is evident throughout the world. In different societies, it is evident. Like there are examples of rise of Trump, the idea of Mexican wall, or the deportation of refugee law in the Europe. These are all the ideas of this xenophobia and jingoism that is evident in the world. So is it really necessary? That is the question we need to ask. So considering this, we need to think of this think that a nation, a society, or a state isn't perfect enough, isn't flawless. It is always having some flaws. And it is these flaws that require interaction with others to highlight these flaws, to interact on these flaws, to cooperate, and to have that willingness to change the society as a whole. That is the thing that we need to have. But we don't have that. We always skip these ideologies, and what happens? We need some phenomena like Gandhi to happen to explain us nationalism. That nationalism is not a language, a religion, or an enemy towards which all the citizens needs to just have their animosity and hatred towards. The nationalism is an idea, a set of values on which a society is created. We need more than 25 years to demolish Berlin Wall, which was dividing the East and West Germany. And even after that, we are not learning the lesson to remove other barriers that are existing in the world. We need a Martin Luther King to just highlight that black people have equal rights as the whites and others. So we really need to change these things. Even after all these lessons, we haven't changed. That is why, just one slide back. That is why Martin Luther Jr. King, in one of his famous speeches, said, and I quote, "I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves, the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together on the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." It is all those things that we have seen in our history, but we are not able to inculcate in ourselves. So as a human, we have several problems. So we are not here to provide a solution or a method to solve it. We are here to give an idea. The idea is, be the change you want to see in yourself. What happens when we see a problem like this? We generally blame it on government or law. But we need to understand what government stands for. Government stands for society. What law means? Law represents the thinking of the society. So, and the society isn't something that we said the society is like this, so we can't do anything. Society is made of each individuals like us. So we need to take care of this. But what happens, like I will quote an example of my college. My college is considered one of the premier colleges of the country. So there are some student body elections are there. So what happens, someone is contesting the election, so they would provide some PR to you and you will vote for him or her. When I ask him, why you do that? When you are abusing the national parties for all the corruption and all those things, why you are doing this right here? So they are just like, aise hi hota hai. This is how society works.
Thank you.
This is not the thing that happens. In society, there are many people who are just earning enough to sustain their livelihood and their food. So we can't expect from them. We are here, we can't die of the starvation or hunger. So we need to take it upon ourselves to start. And it is in these times of that society is in great deep trenches and
Yes,
humanity
thank you.
is at stake that we
Questions?
need to take up. Thank you.
Hello. Could you please explain what are right-wing parties?
Europe or right-wing parties?
In general.
Basically deal with the extreme form of nationalism. So, I mean, like when they are saying that you are not tolerant at all, they believe in one idea and they believe that's the only idea.
Okay.
No, say.
Comparison of Hitler and Trump is laughable at best, and AFD won 95 seats, by the way.
One thing at once. So you started with Martin Luther King. So what happened till 50s and 60s in America? Black people didn't have the voting rights. They were not equal with the whites. So they were discriminated based on their colors. And this is the thing. You can give many names to this thing. Casteism, really, what you say, that word is there. Caste politics, religious politics, all those things. But in general, deep down, this is hatred and fear against others. That's all. The whites really fear that blacks would be coming in the mainframe and they would be having our job. They hate them so much that they were not willing enough to provide them the rights itself. So that was important from the point of Martin Luther, that speech and whole. So deep down, the jingoism is nationalism, xenophobia is fear and hatred of foreign objects. For white Americans, Native Americans, No, the blacks were shipped from Africa to America.
What's the timeline between civil rights movement and the transatlantic slave trade?
So that's,
it's about 150
what we
years.
are saying is it's xenophobia. So when you are looking, when you are hating some other race, that's what is happening, right? The whites.
I'd like to add one point. When we say foreigners, it's not just separated by national boundaries. By foreigner is what we mean is any alien entity who is not same as what we are, be it on the basis of color, national boundary, language, culture, anything.
See, if tomorrow someone from IIM Bangalore comes here, you will discriminate against them also. That is the thing. That is discrimination based on some foreign
I think we are getting into a technical field, but the question here is, sometimes even when you are technically, a citizen of a country, you still live like a foreigner, right? Because in the US, often the Indians who migrated there and got citizenship would be asked, where are you from? Right, and if they say that, I'm an American, that's not an acceptable answer. So where are you from? And the same question are asked to the Americans, so where are you from? They get offended. Because they think, Caucasians think they're American because they're white. Right? So similarly, that stands for blacks as well. Right? So that perceived notion of who is foreigner and who is, who belongs to that country differs from the technical definition of that. Probably they are indicating that.
And I don't have a question. I would just like to point out one thing you said. You said right wing means extremism. Right wing doesn't necessarily mean extremism. It's just a political theology. It borders on the right hand side, which means that they basically believe in free market operations. So extremism comes as a byproduct of right wing aggression. Okay, I just wanted to point that out. It's not necessarily right wing ideology.
All right. So my question is that you have heard about that Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustan. Going by that, your definition, so that is that has traces of, right? How would you explain that?
Sir, it's not jingoism exactly. It's patriotism.
But this is
when I'm
this is
glorifying
a comparative. Comparison of that Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustan Hamara. So it is like, somewhat, we are better than everyone else. Mera Bharat Mahan, that is not comparative. It's great, right? But when you say Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustan Hamara, then there is a problem. And when we start believing in that, somewhere deep down, we assume supremacy over others, right? So yes, probably, here.
Sir, when this song was written, we were under the colonial rule and we were continuously told that we are not good enough to rule ourselves. So that was the time this song was written, and obviously, I mean, like they were exhorting people that we could govern ourselves, and that resulted in the movement.
Okay. So you are saying that this is contextual, you know, in that particular context probably it was required, you know, to make us believe that we can do something. Yes, sometimes that's possible, you know, like it may not spread hatred, but, you know, it is possible, you know, we need to sometimes tactfully bring that, you know, say faith back in ourselves that, you know, yes, we are good enough. Okay, thank you. Next group, please.